The Zelda franchise is truly something special, and I don't say this lightly. Time and time again, this series reinvents itself. One thing that I love about the Zelda franchise is that it's never been afraid to experiment. Now, not everything that it's tried has stuck, or even been good for that matter, but I mean, compared to some other franchises, I'm grateful that the Zelda team is unafraid of taking the game in new directions. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have basically redefined what a Zelda game can be. So that leaves us with their most recent games. I personally call this era of Zelda the Wild Era, taking its namesake from the game that began this period, Breath of the Wild. Now, I'm not going to rehash why this game is perfect in every way imaginable. That's been done to death already. Breath of the Wild earned its flowers, and deservingly so. It's so uniquely un-Zelda, and I think that's what the community was craving at the time. Coming off the heels of the lukewarm reaction to Skyward Sword, the developers knew that they needed something that broke the infamous Zelda formula in a drastic way. So, Breath of the Wild was born, the first open-world Zelda game, jam-packed with unique gameplay, a beautifully designed Hyrule, and a new way to experience Zelda like never before. Breath of the Wild not only took the Zelda community, but the gaming community as a whole by storm, bringing people who had never even so much as touched a Zelda game before into the series, and setting an industry precedent for open-world games after it. The Zelda team hit it out of the park, and made a lot of money from Breath of the Wild sales, so of course they were going to cash that check in. In the 8 years, following the Breath of the Wild's release, we've gotten 3 games that I consider part of the Wild era, an era defined by its emphasis on non-linearity and following one mostly continuous timeline, with another game, Age of Imprisonment, coming around this winter, I think. From what we've seen, serves to fill in the details of the imprisoning war mentioned in Tears of the Kingdom. With the way the Wild Era has presented its story, where the events have already happened and Link is simply bearing witness to these events, it creates a problem where we have to do a lot of backtracking to fill in these gaps, notably with the spin-off Hyrule Warrior games. So, after all that, it kind of leaves one really big question in my own and a lot of other fans' minds. Where do we go after this? Age of Imprisonment, is most likely going to be the last game in the Wild Era. So what does the Zelda series do after this? In my opinion, they've kind of written themselves into a corner, now having to provide payoff for all the new lore that they introduced in these games, most of it having little to no correlation with any of the games or story that came before. I fear that they kind of got caught up in it all, the bigger and betterness of Breath of the Wild, now that it's starting to overstay its welcome because they simply added too much to bring it all to a satisfying conclusion. Age of Imprisonment has to tie all this weird Zonai stuff, the timeline inconsistencies, and all the other things that they tacked onto these games in a neat little bow, and somehow not crash and burn the story in the process. Tears of the Kingdom, despite all metrics being a phenomenal game, is highly controversial in the community. Something just didn't click like it did with Breath of the Wild, and I think part of this is because Tears is just too much like Breath of the Wild. But I also think it goes a little deeper than that. The Zonai are just plain confusing additions. They were cool when they were vaguely alluded to in Breath of the Wild and largely unexplained, but now their lore clashes with the pre-established timeline and we simply don't see enough of them in order to get any clarification. Most of what we know about them is from Rauru and his sister, whose name I'm forgetting, and their relevance is confined to these snippets of Zelda's memories. I think the Zonai's inclusion in this continuity should have been a more drawn-out thing. Let them steep in the mystery for a few games. And yet, despite all of its flaws, Tears of the Kingdom is still widely regarded as one of the best games in the Zelda series, blowing a lot of other Zelda titles out of the water in terms of sheer scope. Part of me kind of worries for the future of this franchise and how fans will receive any new titles that come along once the Wild Era comes to its conclusion. The Zelda team is caught in a bit of a rock and a hard place, if you will. They now have a whole new influx of Zelda fans who came along during the Wild Era, who were receptive to this specific style of open-world Zelda. Would a return to linearity, like what some older fans have been calling for, retain this new audience Zelda has gained? Are we ever going to return to the original timeline, or is Zelda just going to continue in this distant future, all the timelines are merged path? It's honestly really hard to say, but what I can deduce is that for the past 30-some-odd years, the Zelda franchise has been good at adapting itself. funnily enough, we were in a much similar position back when Ocarina of Time and its direct sequel, Majora's Mask, came out, in the ye old years of 1998 and 2000. The time era was similarly a monumental shift for the Zelda franchise, as it marked its jump from 2D to 3D. Ocarina of Time is still largely considered the best game in the franchise, and Majora's Mask is certainly not running short on its praise either, its story being cited as one of Zelda's most profound and impactful narratives. The next Zelda successor, post Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, had a lot riding on its shoulders, and the Zelda team felt this pressure tenfold. Out of this pressure, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker was born, something completely unlike what the community was expecting. What was desired was something dark and gritty, like what was shown in the Space World 2000 tech demo. Jesus. What we got was a slapstick, cartoony game set in the middle of the Great Sea, with a young Link who never intended to be the hero in the first place. There was no big prophecy, no time travel shenanigans, just a young kid trying to do right by his kidnapped sister, willing to do whatever it took to get her back, even if that meant leaving everything he knew, even if that meant being forced to grow up. Yeah, so people hated this game when it came out. But as time went on, people came back to re-examine this game, give it a fair shake that wasn't given back in 2000. And nowadays, The Wind Waker is one of the most coveted games in the series. Its story just as compelling and beautiful as the games that came before it. Wind Waker is amazing, and I'm glad it eventually got the props it deserved. So, maybe, just maybe, we don't have to worry, you know? If the Zelda franchise can go on to do bigger and greater things than the greatest game, Ocarina of Time, surely they can do great things post Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Age of Calamity, Age of Imprisonment, that one other game with Zelda as the protagonist. You know, maybe we have nothing to worry about, you know? Even if these games have taken a few stumbles, and trust me, they have stumbled, I have faith in the Zelda team that they can deliver. I mean, they've done it in the past. And I believe that these games just, I don't know, their capacity to evolve just makes them special in a way. Like, Zelda is so familiar, yet so different every time you pick it up. Like, you know, there's obviously, like, the things that always remain the same, but sometimes things are different. Actually, no, a lot of times things are different. There's a new gimmick, a new mechanic, new characters. It's honestly really amazing. And I think that's why I've been so drawn to this series. They always have the capacity to shake it up when need be, you know? And from what we've seen before and what we've been given before, it honestly makes me more excited to see what they do next. They've had the time to kind of soak in all the criticism and backlash from Tears of the Kingdom, and Zelda team is very attuned to what the community wants. I mean, that's how we got my favorite game, Twilight Princess. Just not to brag or anything. It was because of the backlash that came from Wind Waker and the desire for a more gritty Zelda game. The dev team is capable of listening, so all that leaves for us to do is to engage and tell them what we want. And I don't know, I'm excited. I look forward to Age of Imprisonment, and I want to see what it brings to the table, and hopefully it fixes a little bit of the absolute mess that is Tears of the Kingdom and its story. That would be great, guys. Please explain what's going on with the sages and like that whole thing. That was really weird. And that's all I have to say. Bye.